To the residents of Bolton Hill, the combination of history, architecture, culture, and community all add up to perfection.
Bolton Hill is a perfect example of city living. You can, come out of your house and walk across the street to our local cafe. If you walk a little further, you find, the Lyric, the Symphony is nearby. It's a perfect place for city living.
The first thing that happens when you move into Bolton Hill is you realize how special this community is. You make friends very quickly, your neighbors are very welcoming, they open their doors, they sit on their stoops, and they talk to you in front of church or in front of the coffee shops. And that really creates this huge sense of warmth and acceptance right away when you come into Bolton Hill.
I think for the most part, everybody seems to know each other. There's a lot of old houses, great architecture, lots of trees, lots of people that take pride in their homes, lots of cool front gardens. We have a lot of children in the neighborhood and a lot of families, and for my family, that's a huge draw.
When I walk around the community of Bolton Hill, I see a quaint area. It's a very small town feel, even if you're in Baltimore City. You have beautiful row houses with a lot of history. You have the trees, a lot of people walking their dogs. I think it's a relatively safe neighborhood, and I love seeing the kids running around. You see all age groups as well, so it's not just a certain demographic or age bracket.
It's a small, tight-knit community. You know these people, and they've been here forever, and they're not going anywhere. But everybody knows them.
When I walk through Bolton Hill, I see a community that cares for each other, a community that knows each other by name, and if you don't know their name, you definitely know their dog's name or their children's name, and a community that cares for each other, that accepts packages for each other, that knocks on people's doors if they see things amiss. And I see a community that really is committed to Baltimore and loves this city and wants this city to be better.
The Bolton Hill vibe, I would say, is liberal or neoliberal to some. I think there's a certain generosity here. Friendly, generally. And a little bit odd.
Sometimes you hear that folks think that city living is not a good idea, that cities is a place where I'm going to go and work, it's a place where there's going to be stores and businesses, but it's not a place to live. Those people have got it all wrong.
Well, there are two kinds of people. The people who work and live in the suburbs, and they have that mentality that they come to the city to work and then they go back to the suburbs to live because you wouldn't want to live in the city. And then there are people who want to live in the city and who work in the city, and like me.
I think for me, what really has made Bolton Hill a community that works for my family and for myself is getting to know people. I have very friendly neighbors. I feel like I can, just being outside and talking to them and seeing them every day, I feel like I can count on them to pick up my kids from school. If I'm sick and I need to run out, having somebody watch my children, that's a really important thing.
Bolton Hill, among lots of other neighborhoods in the city, are places to live. They're places to thrive. They're places for families to grow and learn. I can't imagine living way out in the suburbs on a lot that's an acre or 2 acres and not be able to easily walk to the next door neighbor, just to say hello.
You move someplace, you embrace it. I wouldn't move to Omaha. I probably wouldn't move to Boston. I wouldn't want to live in DC. There's something about Baltimore that's just charming. And it is a certifiably weird city. Bolton Hill, there's a lot of interesting plaques on the buildings, little oval blue plaques of some very unusual, interesting people who've lived here. Park Avenue was F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Zelda, I think, lived there. The Great Gatsby.
Just feels like there's a lot of history and that the neighborhood has been here long before me and it'll be here long after me, and I think that it feels really good to be a part of something like that.
Well, my history in this community dates back to when I was a child.
We are just an open community which trying to work and get our families the best we can.
There's a little stamp of each individual person who's lived here.
To put your feet where so many before you have walked.
That kind of thing sends chills up your spine.
Bolton Hill prides itself on being one of the first integrated communities in Baltimore. And that is true, but only to an extent.
I know some of the history of the neighborhood isn't really positive.
Bolton Hill also had very strong restrictive covenants. One of the most prominent is the 1200 block of Bolton Street, which was one of the barrier streets that sort of separated Bolton Hill from the rest of Baltimore.
It's one of those city neighborhoods that had covenants and anti-diversity bias, back in the day. That's largely overcome, and of course the covenants are no longer enforceable.
Bolton Hill always had black streets and parts of the neighborhood that were open to black residents, mainly because white residents in Bolton Hill needed a place for their servants to live. So we had alley streets and smaller side streets, including Dolphin Lane, which has mostly been destroyed, Rudder Street, and a few other border streets that were, historic neighborhoods, historic streets where black servants, the servant class in 18th and early 19th century Baltimore would live. There was some really ugly episodes in the early history of this neighborhood around issues of racism that we're still, I think, working to undo.
There's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of conversations about how to change that and how to admit what the history was so that we don't repeat it.
So making sure that we're aware of all the issues that happened here in the neighborhood, restrictive covenants, things like the erection of the Confederate monument over on Mount Royal, which has since been taken down, the process of urban renewal and how it impacted this community and how it pushed out large numbers of black families, and other historical things that we can't forget. At the same time, we should celebrate the diverse community that Bolton Hill is today.
There's a lot of new young families coming in and just younger people with a more open-minded mindset. So I think that we're kind of rewriting history a little bit, doing something different than what's been done before, for sure.
So the neighborhood now has a social action task force that takes explicit action around issues of equality and justice here in Baltimore, focusing mainly on issues of poverty, education, racial injustice.
I think when you talk about the differences in the communities and the balance that's needed, I think my view is that as a school and as an institution, we are the agent of the change. I feel here at Mount Royal we have a very unique opportunity to teach our students and send that message that we are part of a larger world. So we actually go out into the community, and I tell my students the more opportunities we have for community members to engage with us, that's how we break down barriers and stereotypes and perceptions.
Well, I think certain times in the year when Micah is in session, we have a lot more young people walking around.
I look at the students and say, wow, they get younger every year, and it's pointed out to me, no, you're getting older every year.
It's very exciting. All the cafes are filled with young kids.
I think it's a good thing to have students coming through because you're getting a new generation, new information, hopefully, and it can be refreshing, if not maddening.
It keeps the neighborhood really fun, and it keeps it a little funky and more artistic.
I think I'm really partial to the fountains, because of the motion and the water and the sound. And when we get the lights back on, the lights at night. But I think that having a front yard like this is my favorite spot, physical spot of the neighborhood.
We have some great pocket parks that are fun just to hang out with people. There's one just up the block, Fitzgerald Park, where there are people that come every day and sit at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Like rain or shine, they're always there.
The place that makes me feel happiest and most grounded is when I'm hungry. I can walk a block and a half up the block to B Bistro, be an American bistro, and have a nice, solid, comforting, good meal and a nice bottle of wine.
I believe city is what you make of it. We love it here, we live here, we work here. I wouldn't change a thing.
It's a really friendly neighborhood to live in, to walk through, and be a part of.
Once you're here, you're part of the group and you're part of the family, and that's kind of how it feels to me.
For more information on Baltimore neighborhoods and full episodes of My Town, go to www.charmtv.tv.